Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Hello and welcome to another episode in our debut Spotlight series, where we shine a light on the freshest authors and their work. Today that spotlight is on Rosie Storey and her debut novel, Dandelion is Dead, which is out now. Rosie Storey is a writer based in London. She grew up on a farm in the south of England and then went on to have a corporate career in tech before leaving that world to finish her debut novel. Rosie holds a master's in creative writing and works as a writing coach. Her novel Dandelion is Dead has been described as the perfect book for anyone who loves reading Meg Mason, Coco Mellors or Dolly Alderton, which is me. Listeners, I warn you, you will be irritated by the mere presence of other people when reading this book because you don't want to be distracted from it. It is so compelling, it's moving, it's a roller coaster of emotions, but ultimately it is a beautiful exploration of love, people in all their glorious messiness, and a gorgeous tribute to the joys and nightmares of sisters. It has also been optioned for TV, which I am obviously very excited about. And here to discuss all things Dandelion is Dead with me, welcome Rosie to A Pair of Bookends.
Oh, thank you. What a welcome. Thank you, Hannah.
I'm so excited to chat to you today, Rosie. But before we dive into you and your book, I do like to start by asking what you're currently reading.
Yeah, I like to have a couple of books on the go, at least, so I can kind of rotate depending on my mood. And I'm halfway through Heart the Lover at the moment.
So good.
Lily King's book. I knew you were going to say that because everyone loves it, and I hadn't read any Lily King.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I, had heard about her writing so often, and now she's on the Women's Prize list. So I thought I've got to do it. I'm halfway through, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's such assured writing as I knew it would be.
I
Really.
mean, Writers and Lovers is very much up your street. I feel like you would love that.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually who is a writer did say that to me. I think, is it about a mother who dies?
The character's mother dies, yes. So she's navigating the grief, losing her mother. And she's about 31, I think. And she's waitressing and is trying to get a novel published. And it's just not happening for her. So,
right.
yeah, it's...
No, I will absolutely read that next, I think. But I've also just finished, actually last night, a novel called Black Bag.
Oh, I don't know if I've heard of this.
It's so good. I really recommend it. So it's by a writer called Luke Kennard. And it was published at quite a similar time to Dandelion is Dead, which came out a month ago. And you often, are aware of writers being published at the same time. So I think that's how I first heard of it. And Luke's had lots of books and poetry published. And the premise is just brilliant. It really appealed to me. It's about a man, he's a sort of struggling actor, and he gets a job where he has to dress up as a black bag over his head from head to toe with just cut out eye holes, and attend a university series. So he goes as a student, he has to sit in the seminars, and he's not allowed to speak. And it's just such an absurd premise. And I think it's based on a real experiment, like a sociology experiment that happened in the 60s.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's just so funny. I thought, well, that sounds very absurd, and it has so much room for comedic potential, and it absolutely delivers. It's a real laugh out loud book.
So he's a struggling actor, and he's taken this job to dress up as a black bag.
Yeah.
But is this like an acting job? Is this just like a random
So the university hires him, and it's a psychology professor who hires him, and it's based on, I think, the people get comfortable with strange situations. So I think they're sort of doing an experiment to see, on day one the students are going to think like, why the hell is a black bag here? And then, further down the line they'll get really accustomed and fond of him.
I need to read this.
It's really good. It doesn't actually go into that bit so much, but it's more about the man, this actor, really, enjoying becoming a black bag. He starts to think of himself as black bag. And so it's sort of more around like themes of identity, but it's really good. It's brilliant writing as well. It's a lovely sort of literary novel.
That sounds amazing. I mean, I've mentioned on the podcast before that I'm an actor, and I feel like it's really hard not to make that the entirety of your personality. That I'm sure it's the same for a lot of creatives. You feel like being that thing is who you are. and it's a real kind of, you're always wrangling with your identity and like, am I more than than just what I'm trying to be or
Completely.
become?
I have that. I worry about that with being a writer as well because I feel
Yeah,
like, my book feels so sort of synonymous with my personality.
yeah,
And that's actually really hard once it gets published and you get bad reviews and all those sort of things. And you think, I have to step away. I can't let this be my
yeah,
personality. This is not a bad review of me as a person.
yeah.
So definitely the separation of what you do and who you are is an interesting one.
Yeah, for sure. I'm adding that to my ever-growing TBR. I feel like I need to read that. I want to dive into your book now. Before we talk about the story of Dandelion is Dead, I want to know how we got here and hear about your story as a debut author, because it obviously differs from author to author. And I believe that there was a novel before this one.
Yeah, there was.
There
Yeah,
was.
there was a very long road before. So for around 15 years, I've been
Oh,
writing
wow.
on the side of my job. So I had a corporate career, as you mentioned at the start. But writing always felt, it was kind of my secret hobby. It was a
Mhm.
bit like my alter ego, but who I really felt like I actually was. So after work, I'd sort of scamper off to, various different writing classes or back home to my novel in progress. And around 2016 was when I started my previous book. I started to take it really seriously. And I
Mhm.
thought, this is what I really want to do. And I gave everything to that book. And long story short, over a number of years, it just didn't work out. And I
Right.
got to the point where I thought, okay, writing's not for me. I've given it everything. And I thought, well, I'm just going to have to definitely walk away from this book, but also from being a writer,
Yeah.
completely turn 100% back to my corporate career. And it was probably only about a month after I just thought I need to be writing something. And I started writing Dandelion is Dead.
Oh
So
my
that
gosh.
was, I have written a whole nother book, but this was my second one, but the first to be published.
And is the first book that didn't make it, is that gone now? Is that
That
never seen the
that's
light of day?
gone, and it's interesting because I had quite a lot of shame around it in a way because
Yeah.
I felt like such a failure with it not working out. When I eventually, was meeting agents and I sort of, oh, I've got this other book, and everyone, so many people that I've met within the publishing industry have said that's a really common experience. And you probably
Yeah.
hear that quite a lot, Hannah, that actually a lot of writers have at least one book
Yeah.
in the locker. And I did sort of pluck up the courage to look at it the other day because it feels like a sort of bad marriage that didn't work out.
Yeah. I can
And
imagine.
yeah, it's definitely a failed relationship. And I look back at it and I thought, yeah, that novel has gone now. Like its time has gone.
Yeah.
I can see how it was sort of like a long and painful apprenticeship
Yeah.
that takes you to the second novel.
Oh my God. That makes, do you know what? That's the part of writing that makes me so scared, because I am partway through writing my debut at the moment, and the thought of like going through all of this and then it not working out, I can't get that out of my head.
Yeah, I know it is hard, but you've got to persevere
I
and
know.
you'll completely get there. And actually, I think actors are in quite a good position. I know
Yeah.
you spoke to Anna Brooke Mitchell, who wrote Mother Faker,
Yeah.
and she's also a writer. And she seems to, whereas I sort of take bad reviews quite personally and get
Hmm.
really upset, she just she laughs about it. And she says it's because, being an actor, you're used to going for lots of things and things not necessarily always working out.
Oh my God, yeah. And at least I think I want to say that it's easier to separate yourself as a writer, but I don't know if that's true actually. But I remember getting a really bad review for a performance that I did. And it was so brutal. It was just like
God,
a performance at Brighton Fringe Festival. And it was like they said about me and the other actor that they can only assume that we're still in training.
it's so mean.
And I was like, wow, you really came for me in that review, but okay.
I'm sure they were jealous of your towering talent.
Not quite sure, but yeah, it was. I think having to get used to that rejection is really difficult, isn't it?
It's really difficult, but it's also an inevitable part of the journey.
Yes, yeah,
And I think that's the thing with writing is, everyone gets rejected in various forms. And even after you've got an agent or a publishing deal, there's still sort of so many rejections littered along the way, and it's just part of it.
Yes. And I want to say thank God you kept going and persevering, because we now have this amazing book that I have been completely obsessed with. Could you tell the listeners the sort of premise of Dandelion is Dead?
Yeah, well, it's about Poppy, who we meet at the start of the book, and she is grieving the loss of her beloved older sister Dandelion, who died 7 months previously. And when the book opens, she's completely numb and lonely and lost and really spiraling through grief. And she is looking through her sister's phone in a way to kind of feel close to her sister. And she goes into her sister's dating app and she sees a message from a man that just really sparks interest in her, and she replies to him. He's asked Dandelion out a year previously, and sort of the next thing she knows, she's then dating this man pretending to be her sister, and the lies spiral a bit out of control from there.
It's so stressful. The lies just can't stop coming.
I know.
I think reading this so close to when I read Mother Faker, and I've also just finished The Name Game by Beth O'Leary, and it's like there's a lot of having to run with a story that you're getting yourself all tangled up, and I just think as a reader it's so stressful to read that. I can't imagine what it was like to write somebody getting themselves into that kind of mess.
It's so fun. I think it's sort of like my genre. I really like writing about liars
Yeah.
in a way, or people sort of being like behaving quite precariously, because
Yes.
it just gives you so much more freedom.
Yeah.
As a writer, I'm like, well, what's going to happen? What's she going to say next? And it's sort of quite a fun playground.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I just loved that you allow your characters to be so messy, because I think that makes them feel, more human and I think authentic. And I think on the front of my proof, it's behind me, on the front of my proof, it says like an ode to bad behaviour, which I just absolutely loved. And I want to know what it was like to kind of allow yourself to lean into the sort of messiest parts of people.
I love an ode to bad behavior as well, by the way. Every time I see that, the like 16-year-old like naughty version of me is just absolutely delighted that that's come to fruition. I think with with my character's behavior, when I write someone, I do, no matter what they do, I really have to think that they're a good person with a good heart.
Yeah.
And I really love my characters, and because I completely empathize with them and I know them inside out, Poppy and Jake, I have two main protagonists. And as the writer, I know their background, their relationship with their parents, their greatest insecurities, their failed relationships. And so I sort of understand why they make these decisions that they do. And neither of them, so Poppy essentially catfishes Jake, and she doesn't set out to sort of do this series of lies, but she is so lost in her grief. Her grief is so distorting on her rationality and her sense of judgment, and her desire to be close to her sister is the strongest desire she has, that's why she sort of makes these bad decisions. So I think I completely understand why they go down these crazy routes quite incrementally. So it's one decision leads to the next decision.
It really does. I do want to ask about the sisters, talk a little bit about them, because they are obviously at the heart of this story. And Dandelion is dead and has been for 231 days, as Poppy tells us at the start of the book. But her presence is felt throughout. She's such a big presence. And I wondered how the sister dynamic came to be at the core of this story.
Yeah, with the sisters, at the start of the novel, I really thought of them as almost a whole.
Yeah.
And Poppy herself, I think, describes them as a yin and a yang, stronger together than they are separately.
Yeah.
And in the first chapter, Poppy describes how she's grown up in the shadow of this like wild and raucous older sister, and she's sort of by that virtue a shade dweller. So she's much sort of shyer than her sister and sees herself in kind of direct contrast. And that was interesting to me, because I thought, well, what's life going to be like for Poppy, and how will she cope when her sister's no longer there, when the shade dweller is suddenly in the sun? So I sort of wanted to start with in that situation.
Yeah, there is actually a quote that I've highlighted that I really want to mention, because I loved this so much. Okay, so this is what you were just talking about in terms of the contrast between the two sisters and also their similarities. is, throughout their whole lives, people had found the sisters to be confusingly similar. And yes, Poppy knew their eyes, hair, complexion, voice, laugh, and probably skeletons were ostensibly interchangeable, but she'd always felt the comparison to her sister to be overly generous, like comparing a Tuesday morning to a Friday night. 2.5 years older, Dandelion had been more attractive and more confident, more mischievous, nefarious, lightly evil, later more successful, pretty much running a hedge fund by the age of 35. Consequently, Dandelion had been considerably more wealthy, bought her gorgeous flat with cash, mainly though, and ironically as it turned out, compared to Poppy and to anyone Poppy had ever met, Dandelion seemed more vital, she'd been filled with much more life. And I think that's so sad, isn't it?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I don't know why it always seems to be the people with the most life that we lose, and I've had that experience this year, and I just, yeah, it's so hard to get your head around it. But I
Really hard to get your head around. I've had a similar experience, and I think with Dandelion, I also wanted to write. I just thought, whereas Poppy, and which something a lot of us can relate to, she feels very aware of the pressure, the like society's pressure on her of being a woman. She's 37. She's sort of is in a relationship, and she thinks, well, I should probably get married and have a baby. And I think that's probably what I want. But I wanted to write with Dandelion, a woman who just didn't care.
yeah,
She just thinks she is just so not conscious of that noise
yeah.
and leads her life in whatever manner she wants without shame. And I thought, I'm going to write a woman without shame.
I love
And that
that.
was Dandelion.
We need more of that, and it's so refreshing. And I was thinking throughout, like, gosh, is Poppy like in awe of her sister? But then at times it's like she's really frustrated with her sister. And I think that's just the nature of that sister relationship, that it's constantly evolving and changing, and it's such an intense dynamic to have. And I really would love for you to tell us about the sort of complicated feelings that Poppy has, and how she might come to want to step into her sister's shoes.
Yeah, well, she has always felt in her sister's shadow. And so when she gets this opportunity to step into her sister's shoes and go on a date as her sister, she feels sort of close, she feels more vital and vibrant. She feels more sexy. She feels more attractive. And all these things that she is already, but she just doesn't see that in herself. So in a way, acting as her sister gives her a reason to see that within herself.
Yes, I think it's just really interesting to see how she really takes it to the next level in stepping into her sister's shoes. She's wearing her clothes, and then she's thinking, how would she act in this way? What would she do? But then I also think it sort of unleashes that confidence in Poppy, and it's like, it's not just about becoming her sister, it's about being brave within herself and sort of losing any fears that she's previously had. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh yeah, totally, completely. It's definitely, I think I also always do want to write sort of journeys of self-discovery. So
Yeah.
like a big theme for me in this novel is like personal authenticity, and figure how hard it can be to figure out who you are, and then how brave you have to sometimes be to be that person. So Poppy and Jake are both really on a journey to sort of get closer to who they are by themselves and for themselves.
Yes, and as you've said, they meet through Hinge, which is, Poppy's questionable choice of going on her dad's sister's phone, getting into a Hinge app and messaging this guy. I think dating apps are a really interesting thing to kind of navigate, and I'm constantly fascinated by them because I just think they're an absolute hellscape. So did you have fun writing about dating apps and the sort
Yeah,
of...
oh, big time. Because I don't have, I'm not one of those writers who like this amazing idea like falls, like lands in front of me like a sort of juicy apple. I wish it did. But I have, lots of different ideas, lots of different themes I want to explore, certain scenes that might come to me that I just want to write. Like when we first meet Jake and he's doing a runner from a one night stand, a lady
Yeah.
that he's been on a date with from a dating app. Like that scene, I just wanted to write it. And dating apps, I knew were something that I wanted to explore. And I was using dating apps at that Hinge at the time of writing. And I was just thinking, wow, this is psychologically fascinating.
Yeah.
And the behavior and the particular sort of how it's built on imagination. And so you're constantly sort of falling for figments of people because, you'll see a profile and you're essentially seeing four photos and a few probably slightly exaggerated facts or anecdotes. anecdotes, and then your brain can't help but populate a sort of 3D person. And you get attached to that person, or I would anyway, and sort of think, oh yeah, that guy. And I just made him up. And then when you go to the date and they're like, it's very like jarring, the difference between my imagination and reality.
Yes. Yeah, I thought this was going to be the greatest love story, and actually you're a massive disappointment.
Yeah, and that the reality is disappointing, and you almost feel sort of annoyed with someone for not being who you made up. And so I knew I sort of had to build that in a bit, because Jake is obviously he's doing that on a small level anyway, because he when we first meet him has gone on a date with somebody that he's finding a bit disappointing. But then he obviously ends up dating somebody who's completely not who she says she is.
Yeah, I want to dive into Jake because the story is also told from his perspective. And he is obviously the man that is caught up in the chaos of Poppy and whatever she's going through. And I know that Jake makes some bad choices, but I am here to make a strong case for why Jake is great, because I love Jake and I'm going to be angry if I see anybody coming for him. Could you tell us a bit about Jake and why you wanted to share his sort of side of the story?
I'm so pleased to hear you say that, because I absolutely love him as well. I mean,
Oh my God, thank God.
yeah, I absolutely love him. I mean, he's a real silly idiot. He's a bit of a, like, I say this with love, he's a bit of a silly man,
Yeah.
And he's sort of, but his view on women isn't, perfect. And he's got his own problems because he lost his mother when he was much younger. And Jake he's a lovely sort of like beta male who gets it quite wrong, but his heart is completely in the right place. And I'll go into battle for him as well, 100%.
Yeah, we'll be on the front lines together, Rosie. And I don't know if it's just because he was called Jake, but I couldn't stop seeing him as Jake Johnson.
Jake Johnson.
Jake Johnson from New Girl, the
Oh,
actor.
yes. Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But it's so funny, isn't it? Like how you just get like, but I don't know if again my brain was just seeing Jake and then thinking of the first actor. Yeah,
That's not a bad shout.
could happen. Jake is also a dad to a little boy called Billy, and he co-parents with his ex-wife Zoe. And I found the exploration of Jake's relationship with his own dad so fascinating, because he's so desperate to parent differently from how his dad parented him. And I find those cycles that we get into with our parents so interesting. Could you tell us a bit about why Jake doesn't want to turn out like his dad, and why you were sort of drawn to that kind of breaking the cycle narrative?
Yeah. Oh, it's so I sort of really want to give away all the fun spoilers, but you can't, can you? But Jake's dad, as he sort of describes him at one point as like the original Lothario.
Yeah.
He left them when he left Jake and his mother when Jake was 9, and then was sort of not in Jake's life for a long time, and then came back. Jake gets in touch with his father when his little boy is born, and all this is backstory, so it's not sort of seen in the present within the novel. But Jake's father comes back, and he's sort of a lovely dad, and he's gone away, and he's sort of somehow become rich, and it's all a bit confusing. But deep down, Jake hasn't really forgiven him, and he hasn't really forgiven him. And there's sort of memories of all these like different women that used to sort of sit on his dad's lap when Jake was a little boy and things. And so he has to, I think, to really not become his father, he really has to pluck up the courage to talk to his father about it, which is not something that either of them want to do.
They definitely don't. I think as well, it is obviously hard for men to discuss those things. It's a bit more uncomfortable for them. But I think the interesting thing is we forget that our parents were kind of complicated humans before they had us, and they will continue to be, while we grow, they're growing with us. And, we can't see that until we step away. Like I'm able to say this now on a podcast about somebody else's character's parents, but would I be making that a fair observation about my own parents? Probably not. But I think in this novel we see it again with Poppy and her relationship with her parents, because she sort of misjudges her dad's relationship with Dandelion, and she also sort of misjudges her mother's response to Dandelion's death. And I wondered what writing their dynamics kind of taught you.
I'm really fascinated in the effect our parents have on us, shaping us. And so I knew I would have to look at both Poppy and Jake's childhoods a little bit and show their parents in the present. I think it really taught me, I was thinking a lot about how our parents are someone else's child.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I've had this at moments in my own life, and Jake definitely has this within the book, where sometimes you can see your parent as a child and you might see something quite childish about them, or some pain that they carry from their parent that has affected their behavior in some way. And I definitely wanted to look at that a bit, at the sort of fallible nature of our parents.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. It made me think a lot, is what I'll say. Made me think a lot
Yeah.
about my parents reading this book. Now, another major part of this story is grief, which of course we've got the loss of Dandelion and how this sort of affects Poppy, but also, you know, their family, their friends. And I was thinking a lot whilst reading this how wild it is that when somebody dies, we just have to sort of continue onwards.
Yeah.
I I don't know why it suddenly like occurred to me when reading this book, but I was like, it is just so mental that we just have to keep going with our life. And
So difficult. And I, obviously spent like 4 years writing this or something. And I always say that it's a book about life, and it's, it's
yeah,
not a book about grief. It's sort of the journey through grief back to life.
yeah,
However, I had to think about death a lot and the relationship we have with people who have died. And then by the end of it, I still thought, well, no, that's still so confusing and terrible. And I still don't understand it. And it's
hmm
such a cataclysmically kind of mad thing that happens. But the one thing that I do get to, you mentioned that Dandelion's still within the pages, although
yeah.
she's never alive during this novel, but I do bring her in a lot. And that is really what I think about grief is, how much we can keep those we've lost in our life.
Yeah,
And I say in the book, and it's in a conversation, how love doesn't end with death, or love doesn't end with life,
yeah.
and we still love them so much, and it's our duty and honor to sort of live our lives to the absolute fullest, because it's like this crazy thing that is coming for everybody.
Yeah, it is. I've written down Love Doesn't End with Life because I felt really moved when I read that. Where did that sort of concept come from for you?
It just really just came from writing.
Yeah,
I think that why I love writing and why I do feel like I'm a writer is because it is how I think and how I figure things out, and
yeah.
how I work out what I feel about things. So, I will sit down and write something, and something like that will come out, and I'll realize, oh, that is what I think. I didn't even know that.
I love that. There was a really beautiful thing that you wrote in your acknowledgements, and I was not emotionally stable enough to read that, but it's about the fact that this book is dedicated to your friend. I don't know if you'd be comfortable at all, but do you want to share a little bit about your friend and how they've sort of maybe formed a part of the story or inspired a bit of this story?
Do you know what? My best friend passed away, but this story, and I don't ever sort of use her name. I just like sort of say a nickname, because I really wanted to keep everything about her so private.
Of course,
Because
yeah.
I've always kept it really private. And actually, this book is so not about, it doesn't, it's entirely fictional, so it doesn't touch on her, but it touches on that emotional truth that I do understand, which is what you said earlier about, losing someone so fabulous. Like, how is
Yeah,
like vibrant shooting star can go so young?
yeah.
And yeah, that did happen to me, and I think of her all the time. And I talk to her, and I like Poppy does within this book, and I keep her close, and I live my life in dedication.
I love that, and it's so lovely that you've, although you want to keep her private, you've dedicated this book to her and you've written such nice things in the acknowledgements. It's important that we keep their memory alive, and that we aren't just talking about their death. We are
Yeah.
celebrating who they were when they were here. I think it's just really important to remember that, and I'm thinking a lot about those things this year.
Well, I think, just quickly on that, I think that what you just said completely resonates with me, which is
Yeah,
not talking about the death, but talking about the life.
yeah,
And I really made a conscious effort in Dandelion is Dead to never go into, I very quickly touched on her death, but it's not,
yeah,
it's about, her life. So the title is kind of a red herring in that way. It's a little bit sort of misleading, because we, both Poppy and Jake are, looking at Dandelion and thinking about, this woman who's not here anymore. And then it's not about Dandelion being dead at all. It's about them being alive.
yeah. I think it's just really difficult, isn't it, when somebody leaves us and you think, why is everybody just constantly asking about how they died? I want to
Um,
I want to speak about the amazing parts of that person, and how much they touched my life, and not about the saddest part, which is losing them. So yeah, I really appreciate everything that you've just kind of shared with us about that. I also really loved, there's a scene when Poppy attends a sort of cacao ceremony, sort of sound bath with Poppy and Dandelion's friend Jetta, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's such a rogue thing to do, but I know it's quite popular now, but I think it shows how in grief we are just sort of desperately trying to do things to get us through or to feel connected to that person. Where did that scene come from?
I have been to events like that before, and that she also goes to an ecstatic dance.
Oh my God, yes, the dance, yes. How could I forget?
As you said, you can be absolutely open to anything, and also I have no judgment about any of that as well. But I just think once someone's gone, you can, if someone suggests a way you might be able to get close to them again, you know, Poppy's wanting that so much, she's pretending to be her dead sister on a dating app, so she's absolutely up for a cacao ceremony.
Yeah. You've been to cacao ceremonies and sound baths and everything?
Yeah.
What are they like? I've
Really?
always wanted to go to a sound bath. I've heard they're really relaxing, but
Absolutely lovely, really nice, very relaxing, and yeah, recommend.
yeah, I'm just hoping I don't have a panic attack like Poppy does and boot over the. What does she boot? She boots something over, doesn't she?
Portal. I do have a very, very spiritual friend who is sort of my spiritual consultant on this.
Oh my God,
So
stop.
yeah, so she sort of like read through it and she gave me some really, good ideas as well about, that at the ceremonies they often do like call in, your forefathers, and they call in, all your ancestors, and it can go on for quite a long time. And I sort of replicated that. But actually, I think I went to the cacao ceremony with her, and what they did at the start is build a portal, which is what happens in this book as well. So everyone takes the crystal and you put it in like a swirling pattern, and that's building portal. And that's what Poppy kicks over when she has a sort of panic attack.
Yes.
She trashes the portal.
It really made me laugh. It was a really emotional moment for her, but I really enjoyed that scene, and I loved the ecstatic dancing, and I loved her friendship with Jetta, and is it Stefan that's Jetta's partner? Because I think that really shows the importance of having a sort of support network, and I think they have such a gorgeous friendship, and it's somebody that has seen the before and after that happens when you lose someone, but they've also lost someone.
Yeah.
But they're there for the before and after. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Jetta and Stefan?
Yeah, they're a lovely couple.
They are.
Yeah, so Jetta is Poppy and Dandelion grew up in Devon, and Jetta moves to Devon when she's 12, down with her dad after her parents had a divorce, and she becomes instantly best friends with Dandelion. They're the same age, and Poppy, Dandelion, and Jetta become a bit of a trio. Move through the world as a three, and then they move to London together and live in London together. And so yeah, Jetta is absolutely on this journey of grief with Poppy, and she's very strong and loves them both deeply. Yeah, and her husband he's a lovely man.
We need some of those.
I know we do. He's an absolutely lovely man.
But Jetta is so fierce that at one point I was like, am I wrong for liking Jake? Because you know exactly which moment I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, Jake's absolutely terrified of her.
He is, and I would be as well. But then I was starting, because I liked Jetta so much, in that moment I was like, am I wrong for kind of bad for Jake?
Whose side am I on? Yeah. Yeah, she'll do anything for Poppy. And so when she thinks Poppy's been mistreated, she definitely is prepared to take Jake on.
She absolutely is. And, we have sort of touched on Jake and the bad choices that he makes and all that kind of stuff. But it's also important to know that in this story, things do get quite sexy in there.
Do you get a little bit sexy? What do you mean with Jake?
With Jake, yeah. Not with Jake and Jetta, Jesus, no. With Jake and...
There's a scene where Jake gets a little bit sexy by himself.
There is, yeah, but I'm
Which is a little bit inappropriate.
Slightly. But I mean between Poppy and Jake, it feels like the chemistry is off the charts, and the scenes are so I was just so desperate. I was like, Rosie, please get them together.
You sound like my editor, because I hadn't, when I sold the book to the publishers, I hadn't, although it was, full of sort of flirtation and lust and stuff, it definitely, I mean, I'm sort of giving it away now, but I hadn't really, basically it wasn't there what's there now. And my editor was like, you've got to give the people what they want.
You do.
She's like, you've got to give the people what they want, Rosie.
You do, but I think the tension is needed.
Yeah.
It's needed and it's important for the story, but oh my God, every time it was happening and then it wasn't, I was like,
I know,
please.
I know, I know. I think a little bit of that is probably because I was scared as
So
the writer.
fair.
Do you
So
know what? I was like, oh, this is scary. Am I going to do it? No.
I love that. There is also somebody that we haven't mentioned that we must, and that is somebody that I do think is a terrible person and I'm not a
Mm.
fan of. And I don't know if you can guess who that might be.
I do. It's Sam. It's Poppy's boyfriend,
Yes,
and
yeah.
he's the only. Whereas the other, all the other characters, I embody them entirely when I write them, and I feel 100% empathy with them, and so I do understand all their choices. But Sam, I don't 100% empathize with.
No,
He's
definitely.
kind of the low key baddie.
Yeah, he is,
Yeah.
and he is like the patriarchy in the male form. Like when he's constantly reminding her, like, "Oh, you're getting on a bit,
I
like
know.
won't be able to have children soon." I was like, "Who are you? Go away."
Yeah, I know, exactly.
And
Yeah,
I understood why Poppy's sister Dandelion didn't like him because
yeah,
why would you? He's not a nice guy. It's just funny to see that, sometimes when your family and friends tell you their thoughts on a person, it's okay to
quite
trust them.
scared. Exactly. Well, yeah, Poppy is, she will, if her sister says, I really don't like him, she would, yeah, disagree with her sister. And I think that how I see Sam and Poppy is actually the relationship does get a lot worse. So by the time
Yeah,
that this novel starts, obviously when they first met, Poppy like truly loved him. And then that sort of love gets a bit muddled and you get a bit used to it. And you're not really sure if it's just the next phase of love and what it feels
yeah,
like for everyone, what it's meant to feel like or it's not right. And that's
yeah.
where she is. She's like, is this just kind of because a long-term relationship feels like this, or is it actually not right?
Yeah, yeah. It's so difficult though to watch her sort of repressing those, or suppressing, I don't know which way around it is, but yeah, suppressing those feelings and just trying to move forward by any means. And you're like, no, just please get away from this horrible man. You deserve better, Poppy. Not a fan of him at all. I believe that there is a TV adaptation in the works. Is that right?
Well, there's an option.
There's an option. Okay.
It was optioned, yeah. So I think in the works makes it sound probably a little bit more, it's
Advanced.
a little bit more advanced. But there was an option. So I mean, after 10 years of trying to get a book published, I got an agent, book deals, and the TV option within a couple of months.
Crazy.
It was absolutely crazy. I mean, and that really was just an amazing lesson to me that good things can happen
Yeah.
after, sort of thinking that they definitely won't. So it was optioned and it's been optioned by Seesaw, who are an amazing production company who made Slow Horses and Heartstopper. And yeah, things are ticking along, but it's not been, they haven't approached any channels or it's not been greenlit or whatever, the next big stage is.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
not, you don't sort of hold your breath. I don't really think about it. I just think, well, that's fabulous. And I'm sure it probably nothing will happen, but it's just wonderful that it's been optioned.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, isn't it? That there's so many stages to these sorts of things. But the main thing is that you've got your book published and
Yeah.
it's out in the world. How does it feel to see it out in the world now?
It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So it's been out for a month and I'm in a really good place with it, I think. At the start, I found it a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
And a writer friend of mine gave me such good advice, which was just once a book is published, it's no longer yours and you have to let it go. And actually, that process of letting it go, and it is time to let these characters and their story go. And it's sad because I feel so maternal over each of the individual characters as well as the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's sort of sad to let them go, but it's wonderful, to see it out and about and to hear from people that they like it. And if someone tags me and, says something nice, it's just wonderful because I truly didn't think this day would ever come. And now it has. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful and happy. I'm
I'm very grateful and happy that I've got to read it. So thank you. I I'm introducing a new question for the debut Spotlight series, and that is before we get onto your recommendation, I want to ask, what is a piece of advice that you'd like to pass on to other writers that are working on their debut?
I mean, there's really quite a few, but I think knowing that the bad days are part of the journey and they're part of the process, and when you're there in them, you think this is not going to work out. And actually, when you have the benefit of hindsight, you can see how those rejections from agents, those blank submissions, those feelings that your plot isn't working are actually just stepping stones to making your book better, making you better as a writer, and helping you find the right people. So I would just say, just get through it.
Get through it. I
Yeah.
needed that today. Thanks, Rosie. And finally, would you like to give a recommendation to the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my favorite thing in the world is a short story by Miranda July called Roy Spivey.
Oh, I've not heard of this.
No, I'm a huge, I mean, she wrote it 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, and I'm a huge Miranda July fan. So I've read all her books, and it's not in her short story collection, which I also recommend, called No One Belongs Here More Than You. And it was in an anthology that's edited by Zadie Smith, where lots of writers write a short story based on a character. And Miranda July's is called Roy Spivey, and it's about a woman who's on an aeroplane and she's sitting next to a famous actor, and she's just completely taken with him. And it's hilarious. It is so funny. And so it's about this kind of brief encounter and how it has ramifications for the rest of her life. And it's only a little story. And my top tip is to go onto your podcast platform and to look for the New Yorker Fiction Hour, because David Sedaris reads it as
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so on the writer's voice, I think it's called, the format that they have, a writer will be able to choose any short story from the New Yorker's archive, and he chooses this Miranda July story, and David Sedaris is so funny anyway.
Yes, yeah.
So him coming together with Miranda July is just perfection. So funny. I highly recommend it. It's
Oh my
free.
God.
Go
I need
listen.
I need to listen to this.
I
And
listen
also,
to it really quite a lot, because if I'm feeling a bit down or anything, I think I'm going to go and listen to David read Miranda.
love that. You said it's part of a collection of stories.
Well, it was published as in an anthology. Zadie Smith has collected short stories by various different writers, and I think their kind of brief was write a short story about a character.
Oh,
But that's also 20 years old. So
I wonder if that's even available anywhere.
I think I did get it quite recently, but that's also a lovely little recommendation.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm really excited to listen to that. I feel like when I next need a boost of positivity and something to make me laugh, I'm definitely gonna turn to that. So thank you.
Do you like Miranda July's writing?
Yeah, I loved All Fours.
Yeah.
So
I just
funny.
think that she's just so precarious.
Yeah.
I think when you're reading her writing, you think, it's almost like watching someone dance. You think, like, what the hell is she going to do next?
Yes.
And I love that feeling. That's what I like, yearn for in writing.
She's just incredibly playful, isn't
So
she?
playful.
Yeah, and I really admire that. It feels like, I don't know, she's found a kind of freedom in her writing, and it feels like, she's not, I don't want to say it's not careless, but it's like carefree, like
Totally carefree, and she's not afraid to be like stupid.
yeah.
Although it's like she's actually incredibly like adept at her amazing writing. Her characters do really stupid, wild, silly things, and it's
Yeah.
just a joy to read.
Oh my gosh, you made me want to go back and reread All Fours now. Thank you so much, Rosie, for joining me today. I've absolutely loved chatting to you, and I absolutely loved your book. And for the listeners, I will be popping a link in the show notes to grab yourselves a copy of Dandelion is Dead if you haven't read it yet. Rosie, where can the listeners find you online, if anywhere?
I'm on Instagram, which is Rosie Storey.
Amazing. So that will also be in the show notes. And listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to review and subscribe. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on X and TikTok. That is all we've got time for. Thanks so much for listening. And thank you, Rosie Storey.
Thank you.
Goodbye.